to BHookedCrochet.com. I'm your host Brittany. In this video I'm going to demonstrate how to crochet the single crochet chevron stitch. This is a simple one row pattern repeat that's perfect for any projects worked in a flat piece, so blankets, washcloths, dishcloths, anything along those lines. For this tutorial I'm going to be demonstrating with a worsted weight yarn and a size 5.5mm hook. But this pattern will work with any weight yarn and any hook that coordinates with that yarn. To begin the single crochet chevron stitch, we need to start off with a foundation chain that's a multiple of 11 plus 2. So basically what that means is we just need to crochet our piece as long as we want it, counting in multiples of 11. So what I like to do is say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way to 11. And so that's my 11th chain. Now once you've created 11 chains, then just start over. So we'll say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. So what we've just done is created 2 pattern repeats. So when it says chain multiples of 11 plus 2, that lets you know that one pattern repeat is 11 chains or 11 stitches, and we have created 2 of those groups. That means we have a total of 22 stitches. And let's say for the sake of this tutorial, this is how long we want our little practice swatch to be. Then we're simply going to chain 2 extra. And one thing to keep in mind when working with chevron stitches is, say this is the length of the piece that you want. What's actually going to happen with a chevron stitch is it's going to shrink up quite a bit. And I'll have the details in the written instructions, and you can find the link to that pattern here below the video. And I'll give you the measurements so you know exactly how much it's going to shrink up. So once we actually start the first row of this pattern, it's not going to be this long. Okay, so as you can imagine, we're going to be working the chevron stitch, so something like that. So it's going to decrease the width pretty considerably. So as I said, I'll have the measurements in that written description, and that way you can use that to calculate for whatever project you're working with. To begin row 1, we just want to locate the second chain from the hooks. We've got our first chain right here. This chain right there is the second chain from the hook, and we just want to make 2 single crochets into that second chain from the hook. Now we just want to make 1 single crochet into each of the next 4 chains. Okay, and now we want to skip 2 chains. So we're going to skip this chain right here and this chain, and then we're going to make 1 single crochet into each of the next 4 stitches. Or chains rather. We're making one single crochet into each of the next 4 chains. Okay, now in the next chain we want to make 3 single crochets. Now we'll make 1 single crochet into each of the next 4 chains. And now we'll skip 2 chains and 1 single crochet into each of the next 4. So we've already come to our pattern repeat. Now you're probably starting to see the pattern a little bit. Once you make a few stitches, you can see that when we're skipping the 2 chains, that's making the point down at the bottom, and when we're making the 3 single crochet, we're making the point at the top. And if you're working along with me with the same size, we started with 24 chains, then once you make those last 4 single crochet, you should have 1 chain remaining, and in that chain we just need to make 2 single crochet. And that's going to be true no matter how long the swatches that you're working with or the project. The last chain is always going to have 2 single crochets. And so at the end of row 1, we've got a piece that looks something like this. Moving on to row 2, we just want to chain 1 and turn our work. And what we're going to be doing for this particular pattern, now this is completely optional, but this is something that I like to do with the single crochet chevron stitch, is work in the back loop only. So if you turn your work so that you can see the little V's up at the top, so each little stitch is a V. The loop that is farthest away from you, right here, that's considered the back loop. This is considered the front loop. And if you work in the back loop only, what you're doing is leaving a ridge there, and that creates a lot of texture. And so that's what we're going to be doing for this tutorial. But know that you can also go under the full stitch, so you're working under both of those loops, and you still get a pretty cool looking pattern. So go ahead and make 1 single crochet into the back loop only of that first stitch, and then we'll make 1 more single crochet into the back loop only of that same stitch. Okay, that's going to start off our pattern. Now we just want to make 1 single crochet into each of the next 4 stitches, again working in that back loop only. Okay, now what we need to do is skip 2 stitches. So it's easy to locate those stitches when looking at it from the front. So I'm going to skip this stitch here and this stitch. And now I want to make 1 single crochet into each of the next 4 stitches, working in that back loop only. And so what we're doing there is just maintaining the pattern. We want to keep pulling that side in so we've got the proper pattern there. Now in the next stitch, which we want to make sure it's that middle stitch of the 3. So we put 3 single crochets into that chain there. We want to make sure that in that middle stitch we're making 3 single crochets in the back loop only in order to maintain the pattern. Now single crochet 1 time into each of the next 4 stitches. Okay, then we'll skip 2 stitches, so Looking at it from this angle, we're skipping this stitch and this stitch, and now we just want to make one single crochet into each of the next 4. And that should leave us with 1 stitch at the end, and in that stitch we want to make 2 single crochets. So one thing I will mention about this chevron stitch is there's actually a lot of different pattern repeats that you can use for different numbers of stitches that are on each side. Okay, so some patterns might say to have 5 going down, some might have 6 or 7, and this is all just pretty much up to you whether you choose a longer chevron or a shorter one in this case. You'll often see the single crochet chevron stitch worked with different stripes. So we'll have a couple of rows in one color and a couple of rows in another color. And so I'm going to demonstrate how you would go about changing colors here. So I have 2 rows of my primary color, and let's say we want to have a 2-row color repeat. So I'm going to go ahead and bind off. And so I just trim that and then pull that tail through the loop on my hook. Now this is just one way of doing it. So this was the direction that I just finished this row working here. I want to make sure I bind on after you flip that over. So go ahead and create a slip knot with your new color, and then locate that stitch where you just bind it off. We're working in the back loop again. So just insert your hook into the back loop, add your new color, pull through, and chain 1. And now we're just going to do everything exactly the same. We want 2 single crochets in this first stitch, and then we'll make 1 single crochet into each of the next 4 stitches, back loops only. Okay, and we'll skip 2 stitches, so 1, 2, go into the 3rd, make a single crochet into each of the next 4 stitches. So that counted as 1, there's 2, 3, and 4. That should leave us with that middle stitch there of those 3. We want to make 3 more single crochets into that top stitch. And 1 single crochet into each of the next 4. Once you work with this pattern for a little while, you'll really start to get a groove, but one thing I recommend is that you're at least definitely paying attention, and oftentimes what I do is just count as I'm working down. So I count in my mind how many stitches I'm making, because it's pretty easy to forget a stitch, say in the top 3 here. When you've got at the top of the point you make 3 single crochets. I caught myself putting 4 stitches, and then that throws off your next row. You have to rip back, and so there's a little bit of room for error with this pattern, but if you're paying attention, then you can pretty much avoid any type of catastrophe. I find that you typically find your mistake the very next row, so you don't usually have to rip back too much. Okay, so what I did was just to finish up this row in the new color. We'll go through one more row for this demonstration, and at that point you should be good to go to finish up your project. I mean, basically all we're doing is repeating the same row for every round. Okay, starting row 4 in this particular swatch that we're working with, you'll chain 1, flip your work, Again, don't forget we're working in the back loops only. We want to make 2 single crochets. So we're always making 2 single crochets in the first and the last stitches. Okay, that's an easy way to remember what we're doing. And then we make 4 single crochets. Skip 2, so 1, 2, and 4 more single crochets. Now 3 single crochets into the next stitch. So we're at the top of that point now. Then 1 single crochet into each of the next 4. Now skip 2, so 1, 2, and 1 single crochet into the next 4. Okay, in that last stitch, we'll just make 2 single crochets. Now, when you're looking at it from this angle, it can get a little bit confusing because of where we bind it on. So it kind of looks like I have 2 stitches left, but really what this little stitch is, or what looks to be a stitch, is actually the chain from where I bind it on. So if you kind of pull that loose tail, then that will sort of close up and it won't fool you. So we've got our last stitch here. We just want to make 2 single crochets. Okay, and if you were maintaining this 2-row color repeat, then we would bind off again just like we did before, and then bind on with either the green again or any other color that we were working with on this pattern. This concludes our demonstration for the single crochet chevron stitch. Stay tuned for more free patterns and video tutorials at BHookedCrochet.com.